I'm Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Shawn McClondon. Now, Shawn is really living the dream of many Gen Xers because they just love this work life balance, and millennials and younger because they love the idea of entrepreneurship and starting their own business, but they also want to make a difference as a social activist. So, who is Shawn McClondon? Well, let's start with he's an entrepreneur. He started a company called Smart Digital. And Smart Digital is a digital marketing company and lead generation company. But he isn't your average entrepreneur. He has worked in web development and designing search engines. And he also optimizes those search engines for large companies. He's a featured speaker on digital marketing strategy, and he's worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, including WD-40, Dexcom, and Bumblebee Tuna. But that's not all. He is an activist that really puts his passions to work. He founded something called Youth Campaigns that we'll discover what that is. And that's generally a hands on work experience. And it's kind of created really as a pipeline toward careers in the digital marketing for low income, for minority, and at-risk youth, ranging in age from about 16 to 24 in the greater San Diego area. His latest passion is an idea he created called Sister Cities Project. And it's supported by residents from Solana Beach for equality, Encinitas for equality, and Del Mar pushing for greater diversity and racial equity in the San Diego area and beyond. But even that isn't all, as we will discover in the rest of the story. So, welcome, Shawn McClondon.
Hey, thank you for having me, Nan. I so appreciate it.
Well, Shawn, you are clearly a man on a mission, or should I say missions, plural.
Lots of mission.
I am so excited to interview you because you're living just what this show is all about, inspiring people and inspiring people to build their dreams into actions. So I don't think it's been easy, though, has it, as all along your road? So, talk a little bit about your growing up years so people will know what you've overcome and what you've struggled with to get where you are today.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. I think if I were to, talk about the biggest thing that has inspired, you talked about me wanting to inspire people. Unfortunately, my mom died when I was 13. I grew up in Long Beach, California, kind of a rough neighborhood. My mom actually had cancer for probably as long as I could remember. One of the stories I tell people is that what I remember of my mom is that she would go to work and then she would come home every day after work, do everything she needed to do for everyone in the house, and then she'd go lay down in bed. And the reason she was going to lay down, I didn't know at the time because I was too little to understand, but the reason she was doing that was because she was so sick from cancer. And so when you talk about wanting to inspire people, I think that she inspired me. She did everything she could for me to make me feel like nothing was wrong, that we didn't have a lot of money, that everything, was going to be okay. So now as an older person and I'm able to understand and appreciate that, I have to give back. I mean, my mom, inspired me to be someone who does things for other people. So that's really, the big part of it. Of course, I've had, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life growing up, never having a father around, not really having much direction. So yeah, I've had, I've had, and I say that only because there are people that have it, worse than me. But I think I have had some trials and some failures, but I'm still here and I'm still doing what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing.
Were you involved in fending off or going with any of the gangs as back in those days?
Well, lucky for me, when I was young, I was really good at sports. So I played every sport and I was busy. Like I went from one sport to the next to the next. Now, in the neighborhood I grew up in, it was pretty much whatever area you lived in, you were associated with some gang. It didn't matter. So, but the one thing that I had going for me is that my older brothers were also very good in sports. So a lot of people knew our family as a family who, my brothers were in college at the time on scholarships. So people knew us as a family who, was trying to do something. So actually for me, gang members used to leave me alone and they would tell other people not to mess with me because I had a future. I was trying to do something. So for as long as I can remember, I was never really messed with that much by gangs because that was just, that's where I was headed.
That's really good. That probably saved you,
Yeah.
as you know, better than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to hear about youth campaigns.
Okay.
What was your thinking behind creating it and what's it all about?
Well, try to make this condense the story, but I started my career in online marketing in 1998. So just to give some context, the internet was introduced in 95. So when I came on the scene in 98, I don't know this for sure, but I may have been one of the first Black people to start an online marketing company. Like I said, I don't know it for sure, but it was very early on. And every meeting that I went to, every boardroom that I was introduced to, I was always the only person of color. So fast forward 20 years, or at the time, 15 years, working at different agencies, working at different companies, working for different companies. In the last couple of years, I did consulting. And what I would do is I would go around to these companies and they would introduce me to, everyone in the company. And at some point, what I realized by going around being introduced to people, that there were never any people of color in the industry. I was always the only one in the building. And when I did see people of color, it was either someone that was Asian or maybe Indian, but hardly ever Black or Hispanic. And so one day I had this process that I was training account executives on. It was a process on how to create a step-by-step process for social media campaigns. So one day I was in an office and I realized I was the only Black person in the office. That day I decided that I would no longer do that. And what I would actually do is I went and I took my process down to the Jackie Robinson YMCA here in San Diego, which is in a very marginalized community. And I started working with them to create the same program, but for marginalized youth in those areas. So that's how that started. At first, it was just kids coming together to create social media campaigns and talk about the things that they wanted to talk about and then put it on social media. And it evolved into a program where it became a lot of the companies that I worked with, I partnered with them to create a 12-week program where they do this hands-on training where they would work with actual clients. We partnered with a lot of small businesses in the underserved communities and some nonprofits. So they would work with actual clients. They do strategy and then a 1-month campaign, and then they would get a certificate at the end. And so once they got their certificate, we were working with these other companies to create internships for these individuals that actually passed that part of it. And then hopefully that would turn into a job for them. So we ended up having 150 youth go through the program. And we had about 1/3 or 50 of them get internships and jobs after the program itself.
Oh, that's fantastic. Tell me a couple of stories about the kids that you've worked with.
Yeah, one of the first stories one of the things I realized when I realized that this was so important. I mean, I knew, but for these kids was I had a young lady in an early program where we were just doing the social media, and she wanted to be a scientist. And as you know, so she was actually, her thought process was she really wanted to do something with her life. She wanted to be a scientist. We were doing the social media part. And one of the things me and her talked about kind of outside of what we were doing was how important social media was, that you were now connected and you were in a net, you could connect with people that you would have never been able to connect to before in your entire life through social media. So I introduced her to LinkedIn. She got on LinkedIn. And we talked about her reaching out to other people that were in science, that were scientists. And what she ended up getting was an internship, kind of an apprenticeship with a person that was a scientist. And she ended up, then using that and moving on and having success in that area. And I tell that story because it's a simple thing, but it changed the person's life. It changed the trajectory of a person's life through social media, utilizing it the right way.
And it feels so good, doesn't it, to change somebody's life, to help them get where they want to be?
Yeah. I mean, I think at some point when I was doing youth campaigns, that was the greatest part of it. Just having young people come in at some point, whether it was during or after, and just tell you little stories about how one little thing, and it wasn't always something big. It didn't have to be, it's just one little conversation that you have or one little thing that I said. I had many young people come back and just say, hey, you told me this once and I decided to do it. And now I'm doing this, or I'm working here. And I mean, that's addicting. I think a lot of people can be addicted to a lot of things, but I think that's what happened to me is when I finally got there and someone said something like that to me, it became addicting, wanting to help people.
I can believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about this Sister Cities project. How did you get the idea and what did you do to implement it?
Well, so I tell the story of my mom, and this came to me recently, really. My mom, through all that, she had the foresight to kind of shuffle me back between white schools and black schools. So she was a teacher. I went to her kindergarten. It was an all white school. I was the only black kid in school. Then I went back to Long Beach for elementary, and it was an all black school with a few Hispanics. Then she sent me to Marshall Junior High, which was an all white school. And then I ended up going to Horace Mann here in San Diego, very mostly minorities, and then Monte Vista, which at the time was was mostly white. So, but my mom started that for me, and I think the reason she did that was because she had this idea in her head that I needed to be able to work within both communities. And so I think Sister Cities for me was this idea that I always had in my head that I really think my mom put in my head of two communities understanding each other. So when the whole George Floyd thing happened, I was watching all the news, everything that was going on about what people were saying and how to make things right. I heard a lot about policies, which, yes, we definitely need to change the policies. I heard about ending racism, which, yes, that has to end at some point, but it's big. And I think I woke up that morning and the first thing I thought is we just don't know each other very well. And I think what we need to start doing is building a better relationship between communities of color and white people. So build a better relationship. So Sister Cities was kind of born at that point. But what I did first is I put on Facebook, I put a post. I said, hey, anyone that wants to talk to me, I live in Solana Beach, which is, there aren't very many black people in Solana Beach. I'm one of few. And I said, anyone that wants to talk to me or wants to have access to someone who's Black, and this was right after the George Floyd thing, or just, become a friend or have a relationship with someone of color, please contact me. I left my phone number, my email address, and that next 3 weeks, I had conversations almost every day with people. And of course, these were great people. They meant well. They were nice people. But what I realized, even talking to these great people who had the best intentions, was that there was a lot of misunderstanding between the two communities. So then I knew Sister Cities was the thing I needed to do. And Sister Cities, on its basic level, is just about creating events and programs that bring Black and white people together so we can understand each other.
So where do you see this going? And I'm thinking, boy, this would be helpful everywhere. Can you see this being somehow adopted nationwide?
That's the plan. Right now, we've created 2 prototypes here in San Diego County, where we're trying to formalize Solana Beach and Southeast San Diego and City Heights and Encinitas. But those are prototypes. And the plan is really I really do believe, people can call me crazy if they want, but I really do believe that if we had communities, affluent communities with underserved communities partnered across this nation, that would change a lot. Policies and everything aside, but if we were talking, communicating on a regular basis, and there were, formal partnerships to help one another, I believe that's the way racism is going to end. And so that's what our goal is to roll this out all across the United States.
I love it. I love it. And whatever we can do to help you, whether it's put more information up on our news flash or do an event for you on our website, whatever we can do, let us know.
Awesome.
I absolutely also love your library projects in Solano Beach. So tell us about the Skin in the Game and Finding Voices. What is that all about?
So Skin in the Game was very interesting. So I guess at some point, and this was probably 3 or 4 years ago now, again, going back to me being one of very few Black people in this community, I actually was very funny. I bumped into a guy's name was Ron Kimura. He is a good friend, Japanese. And we started by just talking to each other about our experiences in Solana Beach. And we decided that at some point that it would be good to then start talking to other people and sharing the experience of minorities here in this community and in America. So we started with a small group at the Solana Beach Library. And as you can imagine, our demographic, or the people that came, were actually, 60 and 75-year-old white women. And then it was me and Ron, basically. And that's how it started out. I think initially a lot of people were interested in hearing my story. And of course, Ron's as well, just hearing a different story than what they grew up with. Most of them were Solana Beach residents, long time, or grew up in very undiverse communities. So they wanted to hear stories. So we ended up doing it for 9 months. We averaged between 20 and 40 people at the library every month. So it was awesome. I think there's some stories I can tell. I could, if you want me to, but there were some great things that came out of that. And then
tell your stories.
Well, the story that I like to tell, there was a guy, a good friend of mine. So I, as a entrepreneur, having my own business, I would work out of Starbucks every day, and I got to know a lot of people. It was basically my family. I got to know Ron was someone that I met at Starbucks. So there was a guy that I talked to every day, became a really good friend. For years before the actual Skin in the Game events happened, he one day came to me and said, "Hey, I saw you're doing this talk in the library. Sounds great." But he said, "I'm not sure if that's something I would want to do." And I said, "Okay, fine, no big deal." So months and months went by. He finally decided one day to come to one. So he came, and actually he had it was a very kind of a rough experience for him, because it got really tense. There was a really tense conversation that happened to the point where he wanted to leave. Okay, so he ended up leaving a little bit early, and later that day, or a couple of weeks later, I talked to him about it, and he said everything's fine. He just was upset. He wanted to leave. Okay, he fast forward. He's at a space on a Thursday night. Him and his buddies met there every week to have conversations, and he said we were talking, and he said for the first time in his life, this is a white guy, for the first time in his life, he realized that the conversation that he was having with his buddies was inappropriate. It had never really dawned on him that a lot of the things that they were saying were not okay. And these are all white guys in a very, undiverse community. And so he said something. He said something. These are his longtime buddies. I mean, friends he's had for years and years and years. And for the first time, he realized the conversation was wrong, and that he said something. So for me, that told me that even if just one person, no matter how the message gets in, even if just one person gets that message, it can make a difference. So that told me that was a huge thing, that made a big difference in how I thought about the whole thing.
And it also showed you that you're on the right track.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't forget the other piece of you, the piece that maybe isn't quite as exciting, but it's your business.
I know.
So maybe it is as exciting to you. So tell me all about Smart Digital. Mm-hmm. What does it do? What do you want out of it? Why businesses should choose your company? That kind of stuff.
Well, Smart Digital is exciting to me. I have been, like I said, I've been in the online marketing industry for 20 years. So actually, the most exciting part of this is that I have a process that I implement. So usually for individuals or companies that have worked with a lot of different people on their online marketing, or other agencies on their online marketing, and just haven't had the success that they feel like their online presence should have, whether it's selling products or selling services or the awareness, that's when people usually call me. And we talk about, basically the process is just simply understanding where they've been and what they've done, understanding where they are currently and what they're doing currently, and then finding all the tools and resources to fill in the holes to make them more successful. So that's what I do. And to me, that's exciting. And the most exciting part about that is that I didn't come to that, this process, this thing that I do, it took me probably 15 years to figure out. It wasn't something that I was doing from the beginning. At first, I was just doing ad hoc services, web design, social media. But now with this, it literally is a process of utilizing every online marketing tool to fill in the gaps and help you as a business have a successful online marketing presence. So it is extremely exciting, and it gives me a chance to be creative and utilize tools and put things together and create strategies. So it's exciting to me.
Well, it sounds exciting. And, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, through and through. So
Right.
I do understand how that can be exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So of all the things you've accomplished, what's your biggest success story?
My biggest success story, to be honest, is just that I'm here. I guess early on you asked about my childhood and growing up, and I just feel like I've had a lot of failures. I've been through a lot, and just the fact that I'm here today talking to you, that I'm here today and I'm able to do something like Sister Cities, I have the ability, I have the skill set, I have everything I need to be able to do it. That to me is my biggest success right now.
What would you say on the flip side are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced?
For me, it's I would say it's been my past. If I'm being honest, just really working through trying to become the person that I know I need to become in order to make my future goals a reality. From everything from, dealing with, not growing up with a father, dealing with your mom dying at a young age, then going through mistake after mistake after mistake as a young person. And even some of the mistakes are things, you can still, they're still there. They're still, around. So I have to constantly tell myself that it's not what you did in the past. I have to every day just focus on the future because I know what I'm doing. I know I have a purpose now. And so I know my purpose is in front of me. So I just have to tell myself every day that that's what I'm striving for. So yeah, that it's still a challenge though. Mm-hmm.
Shawn, as you get older, you go through the same process. You go back in your life and you in your head and you think, oh, I could have done this differently, and oh, that was a terrible mistake, or oh, why did I say that?
Right.
But you learn the older you get, you just can't undo the past.
Right.
And you've got to move forward. And I think that's what you're trying to do, but it may not totally go away because I'm a lot older than you and I still go through it.
Right. Unfortunately, right?
Now, you're one of the few people your age who I would ask this question, but I think it fits. What do you think is your legacy so far?
Yeah, my legacy is at this point, I just think is someone that never gave up. And that's going to be my legacy. The way I look at things right now is that there's a chapter, when I talk about everything that's happened to me in the past, my book is not finished yet. There's still a chapter that has to be written. And so at the end of everything, I think that's what people will see is that I just never gave up and I just kept working. And when the book is done, the success will be on the other side of that.
My words for it is I just kept my head down and kept swinging.
Yeah. that's all you can do.
What do you view as the biggest problem for society now and in the future?
So I think this communication, I think we are, just like and that's why I think for me, Sister Cities, going back to that, is something that I think would change the world, because I just think we're getting too far left, too far right. We're becoming too siloed. Everyone has their opinion and no one wants to listen to anyone else's opinion. We only want information that satisfies the way we want to feel. And I just think we're moving too far in those areas that we can't even communicate with one another anymore. And so that is what I think the biggest issue is. I think that we need to be able to, it's not only just, have the discussion, because I hear people talk about that all the time. Let's have the conversation. It's not just having the conversation. It's two people being able to have the conversation and not get angry and see both sides and be willing to be open and flexible to maybe hearing something that could change your mind. That's what I think the biggest part, and that's what I think the biggest issue right now with our society is, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are some of the most important characteristics for leaders?
Mhm.
Not right now.
You know, I think what I've always been taught, if I were to just give some adjectives, I guess, especially now in this time, I think flexibility is very important. Being able to, I think what I'm finding the hardest part for me is going from, a black community to a white community, but trying to be flexible on both ends. I think it's listening, and I think it's being a servant. I don't think leadership always is about, what people think of as far as, you're just constantly leading people and they're following you. I think sometimes you have to serve the people that are following you. So, and just be a servant in general. So I think I think I just have these three concepts in my head. So leadership to me is, I just feel like it's not always just about leading. It's about serving, it's about being flexible, and the other thing I said.
Oh.
Oh, geez.
Question for you. What have you learned is the most important thing in your life?
The most important thing that I've learned in my life, I I, I think I got to go back to just not giving up. I think you're probably going to find that with me. That's just my theme. I don't see failures as failures necessarily. I just think they're things to learn from. So I know every day that, like I said, if I'm going to get to where I want to get to, I have to understand that no matter what happens, I just have to keep moving. So I think that's really what it is for me.
So, with the current environment, what do you dream of for the future?
Woo. I just dream. I think it's a practical thing. I think, again, going to sister cities, I just dream that we have areas, we have, um, you know, large scale events or whatever it is where people are discussing hard issues, that we are actually getting to the bottom and creating solutions for what's ailing America, what's ailing the world through real hard discussions. And of course, I can go to and I say that because I think that to me seems like a practical thing. Of course, I hope that in my lifetime that we can all be equal. Of course, I hope for that. But I think it starts with the practical things. It starts with the discussion. It starts with what do we need to do in order to get there?
So, what advice do you have for the younger generation?
Honestly, keep doing what they're doing. When I'm doing this work, I see that the younger generation is different. They don't have as many of the hangups that we have, I think, as older individuals. I think the change is going to come from them. So I see it no matter where it is. I see it all the time where young people are leading this charge. So I just say keep doing what you're doing. But of course, like I said earlier in an earlier question, you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to listen to the other side and find solutions that you may not have thought of by through that listening process. So that's what I would say to the younger generation.
I've heard people say of the younger generation that they don't see color unless it's absent,
Hmm.
unless they're in a room where there isn't diversity.
Right.
And then they're like, why not? And so I think that is hope for our future.
Yeah. I think so. I that's a very good, I've never heard that. But I think by thinking about what I've seen, that makes sense to me. Mhm.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to tell our listeners, our viewers?
I would like to, thank you for having me on. It's always humbling, when anyone wants to, talk to me, and understand what I'm doing. I think the last thing I would just want to say is again, I just want to reiterate that we have to be able to talk to each other. Um, I think for me and everything that I do and everything that I want to do and everything that I want to accomplish, um, I just want to be able to have those conversations that we're not having right now. So I know I've said that before, but I just think it's just so important for us to take the next step towards this social justice, this equality, this ending racism. We just have to we have to be able to listen to each other and talk to each other.
Well, Shawn, I really believe in you, and I think you can do this. And
Thank
I'm so thrilled that you have embarked on this journey.
you. Mhm.
It's not an easy journey, but you're not afraid and you're going to get where you need to be.
Well, I appreciate that. If I would just say one more thing, you asked about that courage. I think about that all the time. And thank you for saying that. But I think we need to start showing more courage. I just think that when I think about people having these conversations, I forget sometimes that it's hard to walk up to someone and just start a conversation. It's hard to see something that's wrong and step in and do something. And I understand that it's hard, but we're only going to get there if people start to show more courage. So I think that's actually what I would like to leave um, with people is that we have to start showing courage every day in our lives, in our everyday lives, and the little things that we do, we have to start showing courage.
I agree.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.